Jason, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you on, especially because you're going to be my first guest on this podcast.
I feel honored. So
I,
honored.
I was thinking to myself, actually, if we should make a deal that if this podcast thing is for real and I actually stick with it, if I make it to 100 episodes, you're going to interview me for the 100th episode.
Oh, I love it.
Does that sound cool? Deal?
Sure. And I'm gonna get out. I'll have to get out my Toastmaster lights. Red, yellow, green.
Yeah.
So
You have to.
I know when I want you to finish, I'll just start clapping.
Yeah, perfect. That's awesome. So, so I guess let me just do your bio. So for people who are new here, which is basically everyone, because this is our new podcast, I'll just introduce you to those who aren't familiar with you. So Jason Schuy is a husband and a father of 2 teen girls, and he's the co-founder of RL Solutions. So RL Solutions is a global software company that focuses on safer healthcare. So for over 20 years, Jason helped to grow RL Solutions from a company of 2, so just Jason and his partner Sanjay, to over 250 staff. The company during that time became a global leader in the field of patient safety software, working with over 2,000 hospitals and health systems, including some of the largest and most renowned healthcare organizations in the world. In 2018, the company was acquired, which allowed Jason to step back from the day-to-day operations and focus more on his family, mentoring young entrepreneurs and investing in early-stage companies. So Jason is also an active philanthropist, establishing the Paul W. O'Leary Foundation with his wife, Paulette. So the Paul W. O'Leary Foundation is a charitable private foundation that invests in children. Foundation supports community-based programs for fun and play through sport, the arts and education, with a consideration for disadvantaged and disabled children. As part of the foundation's work, Paulette and Jason are working with a talented team to construct 2181, or is it 2181? You let me know.
2181.
2181, good. So to construct 2181, a centre to run children's programs. The centre will include studios for art, cooking, dance, and a performing arts theatre. 2181 is scheduled for its grand opening in September 2021 in the beaches area of Toronto, Canada. So recently, Jason has taken up the art of canning and preserving food, and he's got a pantry of jams, pickles, preserved fruit, and sauces. And I saw some photos of this last thing. His last adventure in canning was making 80 jars of tomato sauce with over 300 pounds of tomatoes. So, first of all, I saw that.
I thought I'd bring some evidence of the stuff that I've done. So you can see here I got even peaches
I mean, so many avenues to take for reflect, because the first part of this 4R formula is reflect, and we're just reflecting on who you are. So first of all, like, I don't even know where to begin. The philanthropy, for one, I mean, that's just incredible. That foundation and the 2181 Centre, it just sounds amazing. Can you tell me, what made you, stepping into retirement early, people go, I'm going to be on a yacht in Europe just relaxing, but you've decided to invest back in the community with your wife, Paulette. What, sparked that for you?
Yeah, good question. Well, so Paul was Paulette's father, and so we things went so well with RL and the transition, and with being able to be acquired and having a little more capital. You use a certain amount, but there's a lot that, we've always been kind of humble people that want to give back. So we thought it would just be a real feel good to do that. And Paulette's father was very much in the community. He was a hockey coach. He helped people out. He was a farmer. He was involved in art and all kinds of other things, and really supporting children. And we just thought, what a great way. Children are the future of our society, and by investing in them through fun, it means that hopefully we'll have a better future. That's the goal. So,
Yeah.
and since we have some time, and we want to feel good, we just thought. And the other thing is, I still have a lot of fuel in the tank. I'm only 49, and I figure I still have a lot on the go. Even though it's nice because I'm able to spend time with my girls now, and do other things that are a little more fun. It's optional, but I still have this desire to continually feel like I'm of use and have some purpose. Purpose is important.
Yeah. I guess if it's one thing that I know you, because I know you somewhat personally as well, is you've got this infectious energy about you, and I can see how, even though you retired quite young compared to most people in your sort of early to mid 40s, I can see how it would be difficult to just sit and chill for
That's
someone like you with that infectious energy.
Yeah. It's that's the thing is, part of it is having the opportunity to have more time, and if I wasn't doing these other things, I probably would start up another company, because it's just, I'm not 80 years old, and golf only has so much attention span for me, so I'm happy to do these kinds of things, and it is different. Like, it's very different being in software for almost 30 years. It's very intangible, and you can't put your hands on it. You can't put your fingers on it. It's something that, although you can use it, there's nothing really physical about it. And so I feel like doing this project with 2181 is kind of my rebound girlfriend, where it's like totally the opposite, where now it's like everything is construction and physical, and we're demolishing things and then rebuilding this massive building and everything going along with it. It's definitely, it's amazing how many details go into that. I never would have thought it.
Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah.
anyone who starts a project and sees the end goal, but then has to break it down into quarterly goals or operational plans, strategic plans, then you go, oh, wow, this isn't as romantic as I thought it might be. But
Yeah.
that hard work, that hard work pays off eventually.
Yeah, it's been a labor of love, and I thought if I'm gonna quote unquote retire, which I don't think I don't think that's gonna happen probably ever in my life. I feel like it's not going to be putting me out to pasture, like maybe the previous generations were always thinking, I made it when I retired, I made it, and I don't have to do anything. I'll just sit around all day and garden and do all that kind of stuff, which isn't bad. It's therapeutic, but there's a lot more exciting things for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So
Yeah.
I guess it has been such an amazing journey. And I guess that's where we're going to go to the second part of this 4Q podcast, which is the redefine. So, I kind of want to know what, was there a moment or in your life that sort of redefined things for you, that sort of got you a new perspective or meaning? Because what you went through, starting a company, growing it from 2 people to 250 and a world leader, is not something that everyone could do. And I can imagine there would have been a lot of sacrifices along the way that would have taken a lot of character traits. So can you tell me about what moments in your life do you think helped you lead up to that point, and what made you who you are so you were able to do that? Could you share that with us?
Sure. Well, I think when I graduated university, I got my first job, and it ended up being in software, like sales, and it's great, but it's very high pressure, and you're like a lot of jobs, it's obvious to see if you're performing or not, and some things are out of your control, some things are in your control. But I just remember being in technology sales, and then I moved to a much larger company systems integrator. And at that time, it was literally pounding the pavement because, there was a lot of competition, and I was working constantly and really stressed, and just that corporate kind of environment that just, pushes you to the nth degree. And I was very influenced by it. And eventually what ended up happening was I was working like a lot of hours, and I developed pneumonia actually. And I ended up I remember I went to this, I think it was a friend's engagement party, and we had cigars. And while I was smoking a cigar, I just was coughing, and I just couldn't stop coughing, and I couldn't get warm either. I was just feeling really cold. And now it gets cold in Toronto, and it was a little cool during that time. It was the fall, but it wasn't that cold. But I literally went out to my car, and because I just felt like it wasn't warm enough in this place that we were in, and I turned the heat on full, and I was just like, it was just pumping just to try and get warm, and I couldn't get warm. And so I ended up driving home, and the next morning I woke up in just a pool of sweat, and I was still freezing. And meanwhile, I was sweating, so I knew something was wrong. So I ended up going to the hospital, and they checked me in, and I had a pretty serious case of pneumonia, and I was literally in the hospital for over a week. And they did IV of I think it was erythromycin. And I remember the first night I was there, everything that could go wrong did, as far as having it. All my joints were in pain. I couldn't, I was incontinent, everything was going wrong. And I knew, I actually remember that night clearly, because I thought to myself, if I get out of this, I'm going to change my life, because my life is I'm here to enjoy my life. I'm here to appreciate this world. And I definitely have been putting it on hold, doing things that really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, just to push and for the almighty dollar, or for recognition or whatever. And so thankfully, a couple of days later, I started to feel better and better. And I realized when I was in the hospital, I thought to myself, if I'm not doing what I enjoy doing, what would that be? What would be those things that I find a lot of joy in? What would be those things that, if I had a week where I could just do anything I wanted, what would be that week? What would be on that week? What would be things that I do during the day? And I literally wrote down a whole bunch of different things. And once I got out of the hospital, it took me about a month to recuperate from it at home. And I went back, I literally went back to the job, and I quit, because I realized it just wouldn't work for me. And I ended up, one of the biggest things that was on my list of things that I wanted to do was actually write a novel, because when I was in university, I got these little ideas here and there, and I always wrote them down on a piece of paper, and I just threw them in my desk. And after university, I looked at it, and I saw that, all these ideas could make a really cool story. So I thought, I would love to spend my time writing a book. And so I quit, and I ended up spending 6 months writing a novel. Of course, it wasn't like I was really focused on writing a novel, because when you have time off, that's not all you're doing. But and not to say that novel was worth reading. I have it on computer somewhere, and I haven't even gone back to it. This is probably, what is it, 30 years ago, or maybe 25 years ago, and I haven't gone back to see how good of a writer I was, because it's amazing how when you're 26 years old, how the world's a little different than when you turn 50. so that was actually a pivotal moment for me, because I realized my life is worth more than anything externally, and if it means risking it all to have a good life, I have to do that. So I'd rather do that before I die. So that was
Wow.
that was literally what changed my life.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing. And
it was like
before I
life
guess we
smacking me in the face.
and I guess that's the thing too, is that some of the guests who I've perhaps spoken to, besides you, even though this is going to be the first episode, is around it is those moments that smack you in the face that redefine things, but it's also how you make meaning of it too. So, you know, there are certain people who, when they get smacked in the face, have those negative thoughts of, this shit always happens to me, you know, I'm just filled with bad luck, or, you know, whatever. But you were able to make meaning of it and redefine it in a way that you go, I'm going to make my life better. Do you think, was there, why do you think you thought that way instead of the previous way I spoke about, where someone might, you know, might have like a bit of a poor me kind of attitude around it?
Boy, um, I don't. That's a really good question. I don't know. I played a lot of sports growing up,
Mm.
and I think that I grew up with two brothers that we'd always be beating on each other. So there was the moment you admit defeat, you're done. So it was always there was always some kind of adversity. And I think, especially that's why I've always been a big proponent of sport, because I think that it really brings out a lot in people as far as character and character building. Because when you're faced with adversity, you have choices, and you see what your choices, what the impact of your choices are, like very specifically, right? And in a time period, a time frame that most people's attention span can understand. Because if it's something where you're involved in something for years and then you see it, you might not really get the point of what the exercise was for. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think that really made a difference. Yeah. And
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to jump into the third element, which is redesign. So we've done reflect, we've done redesign, we'll jump into redesign. So you've had this defining moment where you go, actually, like, I want to live my life in a way that I want to live it. You know, I'm choosing to, rather than being a slave to my life. Um, how did you go about, like, what tools did you use to redesign your life? Because, you know,
yeah,
I'm
that's a
really
good one.
curious. Like, I sort of mentioned this to you off air before we started recording, that not everyone just goes, you know, throws caution to the wind and goes, I'm going all in. You know, I'm doing this, because there is a lot of risk involved, but obviously it paid off for you, which is amazing. And I'm wondering,
Mhm.
you know, how did you redesign it, and how did you have the intuition or the gut feeling or the resilience, whatever you want to call it? How do you think you develop that to have the courage to go all in?
Mm. Well, one thing that helped me a lot were like self-help or self-empowerment books. Tony Robbins, the seven habits of highly effective people. Like, these
Mm-hmm.
books really give a lot of inspiration of what are principles that could work in that. And it's funny, because when I'm reading it and I'm trying to practice it, you don't totally know if it'll work. But
Mm-hmm.
then, in hindsight now, because it's worked for me to get to the point that I am, I feel, I'm feeling like I'm living a pretty good life. That it's they do work, but you have to, like, in some ways it's kind of like a leap of faith. You gotta throw it out there, and just hope and have the faith that it'll work. Like, I remember when we first started up the company, and we were a few months in, and we had a couple of employees at that point, and we were paying their salaries and everything, and but we weren't paying ourselves, which is fine. But literally, we had like a $50,000 credit line, and we were down to like 45,000 on the credit line. Like, we had used up 45,000, so we had 5,000 left on the credit line, and the payroll was more than $5,000. And I remember at that point, I worked from home, and I was calling all our clients to try and see, have they paid their invoices yet? Is there any way they can send in a check quicker or whatever. And I remember calling everybody and anybody that we had, business or accounts receivable. And I remember after I did the last one and there was nothing that came up, I just remember sitting back in my chair and just thinking, I've done everything I possibly could. Like, if this is where it ends, then so be it. I did everything I possibly could, and it was out of my control. Thankfully, in the last minute, we did get a check from one of our clients, and it kept the lights on. But that was literally a mantra that I used, especially in the early days, was, I'm just not going to stop. I'm just not going to stop. And using anything and everything to just stay positive, stay hopeful, stay empowering, especially during those times when like nothing's happening right.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like everything's going wrong. We're not, like, I don't know how many times there were their friends and family saying, when I told them what we were doing, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see how long that lasts before you have to get a real job. And thankfully it went the right way, but to be totally honest about everything, there's a possibility it couldn't have worked and I'd have to get another job. So it happens. But I think, from my perspective, is if you just, time is a great equalizer. If you just keep chipping away at it, eventually you'll get to where you want to be, whether luck takes you there or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the fascinating things that, speaking with you about, I just can imagine being in that situation, because I have been in that situation myself where, when outsiders don't get it, you're so passionate about this thing and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. I'm going all in. But, friends and family, of course, they care for you and they want you to get the comfortable, cushy 9-to-5 job that pays the bills, but grinds down your soul.
Exactly. Yeah.
How did you you're in the middle of redesigning, right? You've already gone through that moment where you're like, I'm going to live life my way and I'm going to go all in. I'm reading these books, these inspiring people who are going, you can do this, take this leap of faith, and you're trusting the process. But how did you manage those external expectations from friends, family, loved ones, and of course getting married during this time, having kids during this time? How did you keep that momentum and chipping away through those big milestones as well?
One thing I realized, and I think
that
it might have
laughter
been,
just gets me.
maybe it was, I think it might have been like 4 years in that we were doing it, where I realized it doesn't help to complain to anybody about anything. First of all, they don't want to hear it. And secondly, they're not going to give you anything that that can be of value for you at that time. Usually it has to come from inside. So, I think I realized I got to stop complaining about things, period, because it's not going to help anything, and just drive from the inside. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
There were definitely, stressful times. I remember there was a time where, we were just, trying to keep the lights on. It's still at the come. And that's the thing is, it's not like you have one challenge and then you're over that hurdle and then all of a sudden the grass is greener. These things continue and continue. And I think if you keep, if you have that desire to understand life in from overall perspective and where you fit in it, and if you see the signs and recognize that there may be times where life is telling you things. It's an ebb and flow with life. That's how I feel anyway. And sometimes you attract things, sometimes things come, sometimes they don't. But if you go with the flow, I'm a big proponent of going with the flow, and being aware of those signs of when life is telling you things. And it's not always easy, but if you can kind of get into a cadence with it, these small challenges once you overcome them, you start to build that momentum and confidence, and bigger challenges end up coming and bigger challenges end up coming. Even now, even though I'm retired, there's challenges that we have. This project with 2181 is a massive undertaking. It's taking a lot of people. It's going to take over a year with, probably 20 or 30 people at least that are going to be working on this project.
Wow.
The budgets that are going along with it are multi-million-dollar budgets. And, there's a fair amount of stress that goes along with all of these various aspects, especially when some things don't go right. Like even, we had a tenant in the building that, we were looking to do this, and we had to, they knew that we were doing this for philanthropic purposes. Now they have a lease, and we wanted to compensate them for that, but they were literally wanting to get as much as they could, and they didn't want to leave. They liked their space. And so these challenges and trying to negotiate through it to get to a common place, that, these are challenges that they don't just stop just, because you're retired and you can afford to pay the bills. That's only one aspect, is, financial security. There's so many other pieces that go along with it. And if you're able to just take it a step at a time and take it a day at a time, it's just like, it's so funny. It's just like, what is it? Alcoholics Anonymous? Isn't that what, take it a day at a time? It's no different for anything else. It's no different. Just take it a step at a time, a day at a time.
Yeah, 100%.
Just get overwhelmed. Yeah.
And I guess one tangent that I do want to ask you about before we move on to our next sort of area, but my next guest after you, her name's Anna, and she's amazing as well, as you are. And one of the things that, in her journey from going, from a high stress situation and redesigning a life that makes sense to her, she also talked about signs and listening to the signs. And she sort of was, she's not a religious person. She's more of like maybe a spiritual person, but she doesn't have any kind of clear practices. But she was exactly the same of like, she followed opportunities when they appeared, and they appeared just when she needed them to, some things just aligned. What do you think? How do you make sense of that? And how do you know when it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to go for that thing? Or, how do you know when it's a sign, like the timing's right? And how do you get into flow? I know I'm throwing a bit of, few questions at you, but I think flow is such an ideal state. And if you haven't experienced flow before, it's hard to kind of get the concept of what is this like, flow state that people talk about. So could you just talk a bit more to that as well?
Sure. I think one of the biggest transformative things for me, and I think this is one of the things that if somebody does it, I would guarantee 99.9% of the time, if not 100% of the time, that if you are able to get into a state regularly where you have a calm mind, where you can have some sense of silence in your mind, whether it's through some kind of meditation or some kind of activity that you have that gets you into that zone of just being comfortable and serene, it makes all the difference in the world, because it just opens you up to be aware in ways that, I remember when I think they call it the monkey mind, but I remember when we, there were many times when we were first starting out, and it was a slog, and we were
Are you there?
just going nonstop. I was working 80-hour weeks, and saying my internet connection is unstable.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so
Am I there now?
Yeah. So you were saying that you were just in the slog of things, and there were times where you needed to do some.
Yeah, and I thought, in the early days, I thought, okay, well, if I put more energy, more focus, more effort into it, that things will, I'll be able to power through it. And I realized over time that the more energy I put into pushing through these barriers, the stronger these barriers would get, and it would actually just, burn me out. Like, I don't know how many times I've been burnt out, where in the early days, where I literally, my vacation would be taking a week off and I would do nothing at home because I literally could not handle information coming in because I was just so spent. And it took me years to figure out and use things like meditation or things that I enjoy to just kind of keep that balance, where you're not always thinking, and you realize that it comes from inside. It's not from the outside. The more you push on the outside, it's not going to change things that much. But if you allow and work with it, it's kind of like life is a river, a slow moving river. And you could either go against that river and you can still get somewhere, or you can go with the river and get somewhere a lot quicker. So it's kind of that kind of analogy that eventually it took me a while to figure it out. A little bit of a slow learner, but I'm slowly getting there.
No, I think you're 100% right. And so, all our research, like our neuroscience research and, Brené Brown's research around wholeheartedness, it's the 10-year anniversary of that book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And all the research indicates that rest and play and that time in time are crucial for brain health, physical health, emotional, physical, mental health in general. And yet they're not valued in a Western society, and you're so right, is that we need to be able to create space to allow our brain to problem solve on its own. The arts are also linked to problem solving, because you're allowing your brain to go into flow state when you do art, when you do music. So, when I heard that that's part of the 2181 project, I just was like, yes, you love the sports part, I love the arts part. So, and, I think
it's also good to,
yeah, sorry.
It's also good to have people, surround yourself with good people that can keep you in check, give you a little nudge here or there, give you some inspiration, whether it's life coaches, which I'm really a proponent of as well, that helps take you to another level, or a counselor or a therapist or a friend. Any of those can be those people for you that can help kind of make sure that you're going along. It's not just about yourself. It's also about having people around you that can help keep you there.
Oh, 100%. Couldn't agree more. So we're up to our final piece of the 4R formula, or our 4Q podcast. So we've done reflect, redefine, and redesign. So the final part is realign. So, this is just about your current joy in life and happiness. So what do you do now to stay on track, to keep sort of calm and clear and content, and enjoy the life that you've created now that you've redesigned it and you're living it now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I am getting older, so I'm looking at longevity as well as happiness. But some of the things are, it's funny. It seems pretty common these days that it's getting out there. So things like having a full night's sleep is a big thing. Meditation is something that I do every day. Eating well, and that's, it doesn't always work that way, but at least I'm being mindful about what I eat. Having good relationships is something that's really important. So being around people that you enjoy being around, that make you feel good and bump you up, is really important. Laughing. The other thing is laughing, just having fun. So those are the things that literally I focus on 24/7 now.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And everything you're saying, I'm just nodding my head. Yeah,
it's habits. It's like I don't know when I realized that really a life is just a culmination of habits. Our life is just habits, and they're either going to be good habits or they're going to be bad habits. And if we can choose, it takes being aware, right? It takes being mindful. But if you can choose healthy habits, you can go anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, one thing I'm curious about actually with this realign that you've just mentioned, you've got some really healthy habits is around, you know, obviously sleep is crucial. So, you know, you've got sleep, you've got your time in with your meditation, you've got your physical health is being addressed through your diet and your exercising. But
Exercise, yeah.
yeah, but two of the things that I think you really tapped on there were relationships and laughter, so play. Um, and again, you know, there's sort of 7 elements of a healthy brain platter of things that you need to be getting every day, and you've already mentioned most of them. But relationships and play are some of the most undervalued in, again, a Western culture, because we find in Eastern
Mm.
cultures that's just ingrained in everyday practice. How, for someone who has been a go-getter and has gone all in, how did you learn to appreciate play and relationships? Because I think those are the two things when you're living a busy lifestyle, those are the two things that kind of go really fast. How did you learn that actually I have to put that first if I'm going to get all the other shit done?
Mm. I think it was first having a wife.
The wife is right. We all know that.
Because
Yeah.
they will make sure that relationship stays up there and let you know when it starts going down, right?
Yeah.
So not to say that it has to be a wife or anything, but people having people like that you're committed to, that that it's important, and also having kids, having the family just
Mm.
having my kids just totally changed my life, totally transformed my life. I felt like, especially when because even after years of being successful with RL, and it was on a good path and that type of thing, there were still times when there were challenges, and I just remember at night there were sleepless nights, and I just thought, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this? Like, it's still, there's still challenges that go along with it. And I just, what always calmed me was knowing if there's one thing I did right, it was those kids. That's, if there was one thing. Everything else, who knows? Because as you know, they call when you start up a company, they call it a going concern. I always thought, why would they call it a going concern? Why is that? Like, that's literally the technical term for it. And now I know why they call it a going concern, is because you're always concerned about it, because it can always fail. It can always fail because it always needs people. It always needs people to function. Whereas when you have a child, it needs people to function too, but it's a life, and it grows and it becomes its own thing, and it's just a special thing. It's just, you feel like you've at least done something right to help add value to the planet, in some way.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, you know, I just love this chat. I think you need to become your own life coach, because you're doing, you know, you are just, no, but you're just living and breathing all the things that, you know, lead to a meaningful life. You know, it's not, life is about meaning. You could have the perfect house, perfect job, perfect this, perfect that. But if you're not getting meaning and happiness and joy from it, you know, differentiating happiness and joy there, but you know, that's what counts, and that's what matters, and that's what's going to
Mm.
matter when, you know, you're 110 years old because you're focused on longevity, and you're 110 and you're lying there and going, I lived a good life, like I have no regrets, you know, is having
That's
those.
it. It's interesting. I remember reading this when and this was before, like, just when we were starting up RL. And I remember reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the first exercises that it asks you to do is to write your, is it epitaph?
Obituary.
Yeah, obituary, or like at the end of your life, what you want somebody, whoever gets up and talks about you, what you want them to say. And it just totally blew me away, because, like, that's, and the funny thing is, I remember learning this actually the first was from my buddy Sanjay, who was like, when you're taking on a project, like start at the end and work backwards, because then at least you know what the end is, and all those things that are going to get in the way of you getting to that end that you can deal with, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, when I just remember reading that and thinking like, that makes sense to me. Like that's the way to go, and hopefully you can get there. If like it gives you a plan, it gives you a map, right?
Oh, 100%. And I think there's a
Yeah,
reason that after 20 years or whatever, that book is still in the top, in the top book lists all the time, because it is just
yeah.
so life-changing and so relevant. So I have a copy of it as well. I think,
Oh
every
yeah.
every entrepreneur, everyone who's in this, self-help or,
Yeah.
psychology, counseling, social work sphere, we need to know those habits, those healthy habits. So
Yeah.
listen, Jason, it was an absolute pleasure having you. I'm so happy that I thought to myself, I'm going to have Jason as the first. I have interviewed others. I do the batch recording, but I'm really happy that you agreed to come on. I'm so thankful that I know you on a personal level and I'm able to have you here today. So thank you for being open and honest too about the reality of life. Is there anything you want to say before we finish up today?
Just thanks, Sheena, for having me on too. It's my pleasure to be here, and if people get some words of encouragement in some way, it just makes me feel good.
Oh,
So thanks for
good.
having me.
And
This
I'm
is
going to hold
really
you
cool, and
accountable.
thanks for having me as the first guest. I
Yeah.
feel so honored.
And I'm going to hold you accountable if I make it to 100. I'm going to be like,
All
let's do
right,
this. We're doing it again.
I'm in. I'm in.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.